Firing the finance minister in South Africa, President Jacob Zuma ousts the man who holds the purse strings and the rand currency falls to a 4-year low. So how will the ruling African National Congress deal with the latest blow to the battered economy? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. Grotesquely irresponsible and an act of willful sabotage. That's how critics of President Jacob Zuma are describing his decision to fire South Africa's respected finance minister. Nhlanhla Nene is regarded by businessmen and investors as a competent steward of Africa's second largest economy. His departure has spooked stock markets, triggering the biggest drop in the value of the rand for 4 years. And his shock removal comes a week after the Fitch credit rating agency downgraded South Africa to just one step above junk status. We'll look at the pressures and criticisms of Zuma's government in just a moment. But first, our correspondent Tanya Page helps set things up from Johannesburg.
Nhlanhla Nene is now the shortest-serving finance minister in South African history. During his short tenure, only 18 months in office, he built up a reputation as being tough and choosing his battles carefully when it came to trying to rein in government spending. President Jacob Zuma didn't give any reasons for dismissing the finance minister, but there's lots of speculation from political analysts and political opponents as to possible reasons why. One of those suggestions being the fact that Nene had recently clashed with a close confidant of President Zuma, the man who currently chairs SAA, the country's struggling national airline. The markets reacted swiftly, the rand falling to new lows against the big players in the global currency, US dollar, the euro and the British pound. Analysts, economists also saying this will create a lot of confusion, uncertainty and more instability as to exactly what the thinking is of the people in charge of this economy. On the political front, the leader of the Democratic Alliance, Mmusi Maimane, described it as irresponsible of President Zuma, saying that it would hamper job creation. And the Economic Freedom Fighters spokesman said that, what should other world leaders be thinking about South Africa's leadership, which it says changes its cabinet and finance minister as often as its underwear. So a little bit of humour, but mostly angry reaction here in South Africa, and a great deal of concern over exactly what this will mean to the country's most vulnerable and one of the world's most unequal societies.
For more on this, I'm joined by our guests from Johannesburg. Mzaneli Manyi, president of the Progressive Professional Forum, a civil society forum. Mzaneli was a former cabinet spokesperson for the ANC. And joining us via Skype in Cape Town, Nick Bahrain, consulting political analyst for BNP Paribas Securities in South Africa. Good to have both of you on the show. Let me start off with you, Mzaneli Manyi. Why was Nene removed from his post?
Look, I think what is important to note is that South Africa is a constitutional democracy. We have one of the best constitutions in the world. That constitution gives the president certain powers. In terms of Section 91, the president has got a power to either appoint or remove ministers. And in terms of that power, the president has acted. So as to the reasons as to why he did that, probably the president is best placed to elaborate on those. But in terms of our own constitution in the country, there is no obligation to the president to give explanation to anyone. So I note the various reactions from the market, but I think the market sentiment is actually unconstitutional. I think it is unconstitutional for the market and everyone else to expect the president to do that which the supreme law of the country does not provide for. So the president has acted in line with the supreme law of the country, but people are unhappy purely because the president has respected the supreme law of the country. I really think that people should reflect on this and try to restrain themselves. So he's doing this because of the supreme
law of the country, but he has yet to explain why he's moved him on. I mean, don't you think it's fair enough that people do understand what the problem was here, if he was seen as incompetent by Zuma, or what went wrong?
Look, I think what is important is that President Zuma is a democratically elected president. By virtue of his position, the country has ceded a whole range of rights into him as a president of this country. Now, it cannot be that we have a person called the president of the country and then we have micromanagement on that kind of a position. The important thing is whether, in whatever the president is doing, is that in keeping with the supreme law of the land. And in this case, the president has acted 100% in terms of what his constitutional obligation is. People that are unhappy about what the president has done, they are not relying on the Constitution, they are relying on the emotions to be happy. It's purely an emotional argument, it's not based on the Constitution. And we have a rule of law in South Africa, we have a Constitution which is the supreme law of the land, and this is what the president must respect, and the president has acted in terms of that. So I don't understand why people want the president to be unconstitutional.
Nick, is this a constitutional issue?
Jane, no, I don't think so. I don't think anyone's disputing the president's right under the Constitution to dismiss or appoint cabinet ministers. And I'm surprised to hear the accusation that it is it's anti-constitutional or unconstitutional to protest or oppose that the decisions of the president. So no, this is not a constitutional issue. This is an issue about confidence in the reasons the president has not advanced, but the reasons that are assumed very widely in financial markets that the president has fired Nhlanhla Nene as National Treasurer or Finance Minister.
Why do you think he did that, Nick?
There may be many reasons that I don't know about, but the reasons that have been speculated very widely in the financial and other press over the last 4 weeks is that Nhlanhla Nene has been extremely cautious and thorough Minister of Finance, who has very cleverly and cautiously tried to rein in state spending as we reach extremely narrow space in which to maneuver as growth slows, as government spending increases. In particular, 3 issues. He's been involved in several investigations into the leader of the SABC or into the SABC, investigations that have touched the integrity of Mr. Hlaudi Motsoeneng, who is the
local broadcasting service.
Yes, but more importantly, I think the SAA was some time ago put under receivership, if you like, by the Treasury, i.e. Its finances it was technically insolvent and was put under the control of the Treasury. The Treasury made a deal to lease, the Treasury helped SAA make a deal to lease some aircraft from, and the head of the board of SAA, Dudu Mnyene, decided that she would like to place a company, invent a company, and put it between the board, the SAA, and the company that was selling the aircraft, which was essentially a rent-seeking. Would add a huge amount to the costs, and Mnyene forbade it. He brought the axe down on it. The third issue that has been consistently raised is that Nhlanhla Nene has been secretly or has been dragging his feet with regard to the nuclear power program, which I think everyone has come to assume is Jacob Zuma's pet program that he has a special interest in. Now, if those 3 are the reasons that Jacob Zuma did fire Nhlanhla Nene, and they are certainly the reasons that are held very widely in financial markets, i.e. in the markets that lend South Africa 50% of its GDP every year, then there will be deep concern that our macroeconomic policy is being run and our government spending and fiscal rectitude is being determined by issues that have nothing to do with finance and everything to do with the president and his cronies.
Okay, Mzene, what do you say about that?
Yeah, look, I think it's important to underscore the fact that in the constitutional democracy of South Africans are guaranteed freedom of speech, freedom of articulating their opinions, but I think it's very important that we separate opinions from facts. What has just been said here is the opinion of the person holding those views. The president, as things stand right now, has not articulated the reasons why he took the decision that he has taken. So for people to go around speculating and doing all kinds of presumptions and what have you, I think they're entitled to do so, but I think it's important that we put that in the right box, and that's the box of opinion. It's not actually fact. And I think it would be very dangerous for the country to be driven by a whole range of whims, left, right, and center, of people that have got all kinds of opinions, all kinds of vested interests that actually drive those opinions. And those opinions may very well be wrong or right, nobody knows. But I think as things stand right now, as long as the president has not said what those reasons are, it will be very, 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 very mischievous for anyone to use their own thought up and trumped up reasons to put words in the mouth of the president and decide why the president did what he did.
But I'm just wondering also, you know, as an ANC member, I mean, how you feel about the fact that somebody who was clearly respected both locally and internationally was removed from a very important post, and you haven't been given the reasons. And the fact that people are talking about the nuclear deal, the way the SABC has been handled, and South African Airways, which I believe is being considered insolvent. I mean, these are big issues. Isn't it important that they are discussed and explained and dealt with correctly?
No, look, I think it's important to contextualize the issue, and the context is that when the president made the announcement, he also did part of the announcement to say that where the former Minister of Finance, Nhlanhla, would be going, would be announced very soon. So we actually don't know whether, in fact, this is going to be promotion or what it is, because the president also spoke highly in terms of the competence of the person and all that. So I think it's important that people don't jump the gun. The president has not finished what he was doing. He's probably halfway through. He's done this phase one of replacing the minister here, and we don't know what phase two is. And for people to be coming out like this, guns blazing, not knowing even what is phase two, number one, and secondly, not even knowing the real reason why the president did this, and to make up your own reasons and then respond to your own reasons which you've advanced yourself, I think it's a very position that one should never find himself in.
Maybe they're a little bit nervous about phase two.
Is that the key issue here is that in terms of checking the accountability of the president to the people of South Africa, the accountability of the president to the supreme law of the country, that's the only thing we must measure the president on. And in terms of that, the president is scoring 10 out of 10. It cannot be that the president has to wake up and try and play in terms of how everybody else has woken up that particular morning, that kind of a thing. It cannot be. The president must have something consistent to be measured by, and that's the Constitution. And in terms of this, when the president made the announcement, he quoted on the Constitution. There is nothing in the Constitution that requires the kinds of things people are talking about at this point. This is all the prerogative of the president, which the president has used in terms of the Constitution.
Sorry, forgive me, but I just want to move on. Nene's sacking follows growing disillusionment with South Africa's ruling party, the ANC. Hundreds of platinum miners are suing the deputy president. He's blamed for police violence during the Marikana strike over higher wages 3 years ago. Thousands of anti-corruption protesters marched at the end of September. 2,000 people demonstrated in Cape Town alone. More than a third of South African youth are unemployed. There's been a wave of xenophobic attacks as some South Africans blame foreigners for taking their jobs. And university students protested in October against higher tuition fees. The government backed down and the proposal has been frozen for 12 months. Nick, with those issues playing out in South Africa, I mean, is that how Jacob Zuma is being judged at the moment, or is it a constitutional judgment? I just wonder what happens as well after 12 months as far as the university fees are concerned. What's going to happen then?
Look, I think it is inescapable that there's a high level of fragmentation in a country that since 1994 has been quite unified and quite tightly held together by what some people might call the myths of the past, but certainly by the symbols and leadership of the struggle against apartheid. Remember, the ANC got 62% of the vote in the May 2014 election. You know, in international terms, this is still a comfortable majority. There is a lot of evidence to suggest that the ANC is crumbling about the edges, that it is losing significant support in particularly black middle-class areas within the Gauteng districts. But again, we're talking about the downside in the upcoming local government election could really be not much more, could not be much more than 54% possibly that the ANC would go down to. I think that will make the ANC quite anxious, and I think the ANC leadership is quite anxious. But the idea that Jacob Zuma is concerning himself inappropriately with the cabinet ministers, I think is also wrong. Of course, he needs to watch the cabinet and watch its performance. I think the issue here, the very specific issue, is that there is a high level of distrust for why the president has acted. It's precisely because the president has not given us reason that we are obliged to pull the reason in ourselves. And there are several reasons that are out there give good explanation of why Nene has, impolitely, has got in Zuma's face.
Sure. So this has led people assume, rightly or wrongly. But let me pick up with you, Mzaneli, the fact that many people within the ANC are feeling disillusioned with the party, with the leadership in some camps. What do you think the ANC can do to return its reputation as a country, as a party of the moral high ground?
Yeah, let's make a few points very briefly. I think, once again, let's understand that South Africa is a constitutional democracy.
No,
the issues of
please, sorry, can I just ask you, you have made that point, clear. I'd like to, and I totally understand what you're saying about that, but I'd like to talk about what's happening within the leadership, the ANC now, the leadership battle, and what it's doing to get the country back on track.
It's important because it's part of your insight. One has to respond to these things. That in this country, the issue of protest is guaranteed in the Constitution. So people, when they protest, we should not see that it's something out of order. People have got a right to protest. They're guaranteed that constitutional right. Yes, indeed, even with Marikana, it was a very tragic incident, but the president did act in terms of that because a Falam commission was appointed and all that. So I'm basically trying to say to you that you don't have a president here that is insolent. You have a president that responds to the issues that are on the ground. The issue of ANC losing support and what have you and all of that, these really are these are not backed by facts, actually. These are just sentiments of the people. These are wishes of the people. Indeed, the percentage drop was actually not much, 2 percentage points or so from the previous poll, as it were. And we know the reasons, and the reasons were the breakaways and maybe one of the unions not wanting to campaign and all that. But indeed, the ANC machinery, I'm almost sure that it will come back and do what it needs to do to get back and deliver what it needs to deliver. What is very clear in this country is that the overwhelming majority of these people of South Africa continue to have their hopes and aspirations pinned on the ANC. All other opposition parties have tried everything they can, but for some reason, they do not enjoy the support of the people, and this is backed up by numbers. I mean, the next biggest party in this country has only polled 22%. So indeed, the African National Congress continues to be the party of South Africa, continues to enjoy all the hopes, and people know that their full emancipation can only be realized through the ANC. Yes, the ANC is not perfect as an organization, but the ANC has got internal processes which it engages in to improve itself. One of the things is service delivery. The ANC is working on that. If a particular municipal manager is not doing what they needs to get done, the ANC does fire people that don't
But you would
perform.
think, and Nick, I'm going to
This
bring you in here, you
this
think that the
whole-
ANC needs to do something about the falling rand, the hemorrhaging of money, the security situation. I mean, something clearly needs to be done, and it seems that the message is not getting through to the top leadership. Is a viable opposition around in South Africa that can challenge the status quo?
Frankly, I think the decision to axe Nene was an extraordinarily bad mistake by the ANC. I also think it was a huge overestimation by Jacob Zuma of his own power and influence. Yet again, it's his constitutional right to do that. But this is a man highly respected in the markets. The markets are on a knife edge. We've just been downgraded. S&P just changed its outlook to negative for us. We're in trouble. We're facing a debt downgrade. We borrow a huge amount of money every year, and that money ultimately funds both public sector wages and social grants and a whole range of forms of state expenditure that the poor people of South Africa need.
And Nick, what sort of impact, sorry, is this having on South Africa's reputation, both regionally and internationally?
Frankly, you can immediately see the effect on our reputation by the response of both the bond market and of the currency markets since the announcement was made. Look at the graphs. They go straight up or straight down, depending on what you're looking at. The currency is in its lowest price to the dollar in the last 4 years, and those kinds of figures stretch right across both the other currencies and the bond market. That's, if you're looking at how people respond, they're selling us. They're selling South Africa because they do not trust the reasons for why this decision was made. They think the reasons are ultimately about patronage and corruption. And frankly, the president has told us nothing that might redress or give us other reasons than those that appear obvious from the various strands.
What sort of impact do you think this is having on South Africa's reputation? And is there light at the end of the tunnel for South Africa at the moment?
No, let's make a couple of points very briefly. I think once again, let's understand that the South African financial situation, the financial institutions in the country are actually very stable. It's important that we don't create high risk of the country by pinning everything on one individual, as it were. Yes, the individual is important, but let's understand the institutional arrangements around the financial management of this country, both fiscal and monetary. We're sitting with a very stable Reserve Bank, with a very competent governor at the Reserve Bank. We're sitting with a very competent treasury with all kinds of systems, and we've got a DG that is in place, a Director General, that is running the administration. We've got a deputy minister, a very competent person, as it were. We've got a revenue collection service that is also very solid. We've got a banking system in this country that is equal to none, as it were, in terms of its prudency and respecting all the kinds of risk management. So the country is very well rooted, actually, in making sure that things move forward. I think it is important that we understand that National Treasury of all departments is one of the most solid departments this government has. And whatever minister comes in there, they come into a very well-oiled machine. So therefore, if one person moves and so on, I must say, I can't see how that's likely to destabilize everything, because we've got systems, everything has got a process in there. You cannot just walk in there and just do as you please. We've got a very sound governance systems, we've got checks and balances, we've got about 7 Chapter 9 institutions that ensure that the issues of governance in this country are well looked after.
Run out of time, Mzanele. Sorry for that. It is the end of the program. Mzanele Manyi, good to have you on the show. And you, Nick Bahrain, thank you very much. And thank you for watching. As always, you can leave your comments on the program's page of our website, aljazeera.com. You can also post your views on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Jane Dutton, and all of the team here, Goodbye for now.